What if you woke up tomorrow and the grocery stores were gone? Not closed, not delayed, gone. No restock trucks pulling into parking lots, no online orders processing, no timeline, no updates, no back to normal on the horizon. Just empty shelves, a quiet neighborhood, and whatever happens to be sitting in your kitchen right now. Take a moment and actually think about that. Because most people, if they're being honest, would last maybe 3 or 4 days before things got desperate. Not because they're unprepared people, but because almost nobody prepares with the right things. Here's what nobody tells you. Surviving a food crisis has almost nothing to do with how much food you have. It has everything to do with what food you have. And the gap between those two things, that gap is where people fall apart. In this video, you're going to learn the 5 foods that survival experts, nutritional science, and real-world crisis data all point to as the true foundation of staying alive when supply chains break down. Not a random pantry list, not stock up on whatever's on sale. A deliberate, proven system, one that covers your body, your brain, and yes, even your mental state when things get hard. And before we're done, you'll also understand why most people's stockpiles will quietly fail them, even the ones who think they're ready. Stay with us until the end. This one matters. Welcome to Essential Pantry, where we cut through the noise and get down to what actually keeps you alive when it counts. If that's the kind of content you want more of, hit subscribe and drop a like right now. It takes 2 seconds and it genuinely helps us keep making videos like this one. Let's get into it. Picture the average person hearing about a coming storm, a supply chain disruption, or a regional emergency. What do? They go to the store and they grab what feels safe. Pasta, chips, canned soup, cereal. The stuff they already eat, the stuff that feels familiar. And that instinct, that deeply human pull toward comfort and routine, is exactly what gets people into trouble. Because there's a difference, a critical one, between food that makes you feel full and food that actually fuels survival. Your body under stress is not the same as your body on a regular Tuesday. When crisis hits, your nervous system is running at a higher load. Your brain is working overtime, processing uncertainty, making decisions, managing fear. Your muscles may be doing more physical work than usual, and your digestion is already being disrupted by stress hormones alone. In that environment, a pantry full of familiar but nutritionally hollow food is like trying to run a marathon on empty calories. You might feel okay for a day, maybe 2, but the exhaustion that follows, the brain fog, the irritability, the inability to think clearly or make good decisions, that's not weakness. That's your body telling you it isn't getting what it needs. And here's the part that most people never think about until it's too late. It isn't just your body that needs the right fuel, it's your mind. Mental stability in a crisis is not a luxury, it is a survival requirement. Clear thinking is what separates the person who manages their resources wisely from the person who panics and burns through everything in the first week. It's what keeps you calm when the people around you aren't. It's what keeps you making good decisions when everything feels uncertain. And the food you eat or don't eat has a direct, measurable impact on your capacity to think, regulate emotion, and stay composed under pressure. So when we talk about survival food, we're not just talking about calories. We're talking about a system that covers 3 pillars simultaneously: sustained energy to keep your body going, physical strength to keep your muscles from breaking down, and mental sharpness to keep your mind clear when you need it most. Strip out any one of those 3 pillars and the whole structure weakens. That's why the 5 foods we're about to walk through aren't just a shopping list. Each one was selected because it pulls double duty. Every single item on this list does something for your body and something for your mind. Some of them are also valuable in ways that go far beyond nutrition, things like psychological comfort, practical flexibility, and even trade value if things get serious enough. This is a system, and once you understand why it works, you'll never look at your pantry the same way again. Let's start with the one food that most people already have in their pantry but almost nobody thinks of as a survival tool: peanut butter. Here's why it belongs at the top of this list. When your body is under sustained stress, when you're burning through energy faster than normal, when cooking resources are limited or completely unavailable, fat becomes your most critical fuel source. Not carbohydrates, fat. Most people have it backwards. They think loading up on carbs is the way to sustain energy, and carbs absolutely have their place, which we'll get to, but fat is what the brain runs on under pressure. Fat is what keeps your hormones balanced. Fat is what prevents that sudden crushing exhaustion that hits when your body has burned through its glycogen stores and has nothing else to pull from. Peanut butter delivers all of that in one of the most practical packages imaginable. Around 200 calories per tablespoon. Dense, immediate energy. No cooking required, no water required, no electricity required. You open the jar and it's ready. In a scenario where your stove doesn't work, your water supply is limited, and you're potentially on the move, that level of simplicity is not a convenience, it is a genuine advantage. But here's the dimension that almost never gets talked about. After days of eating the same bland, repetitive foods, which is exactly what crisis eating looks like, a lot of people psychologically check out. They stop eating enough, not because there's no food, but because nothing feels worth eating anymore. Appetite shuts down under that kind of mental fatigue, and when appetite shuts down, caloric intake drops and the body starts struggling. A spoonful of peanut butter changes that. Something with real flavor, real richness, real satisfaction. It restores the will to eat. That sounds small until you realize that maintaining caloric intake over weeks, not just days, is what actual long-term survival looks like. Store it cool and dry, rotate it regularly, eat the oldest first and replace it. Avoid brands loaded with extra sugar and processed oils. The simpler the ingredient list, the better the shelf life. And buy more than you think you need, because in a genuine crisis, peanut butter becomes a barter item faster than almost anything else. Now let's talk about the food that works alongside peanut butter better than almost anything, and one that most people dramatically underestimate. Oats. Not the flavored packets, not the instant variety loaded with sugar and artificial ingredients. Plain, rolled oats. And the reason they belong on this list has everything to do with what they don't require. In a crisis, water becomes precious, fuel becomes precious, time spent cooking becomes a resource you may not have. Oats need very little of any of those things. A small amount of water, minimal heat, and you have a meal. In a genuine pinch, if heat isn't available at all, you can soak oats overnight in cold water and they become edible. Not luxurious, but edible and nourishing. That kind of flexibility is rare. The energy oats provide is also qualitatively different from what you get with more processed carbohydrate sources. Oats release energy slowly, steadily, over a long period of time. There's no spike and crash. That sustained energy curve is exactly what you need when you're managing a difficult situation over hours, not minutes. There's also a digestive argument that doesn't get enough attention. Stress is brutal on the digestive system. When the body is under chronic pressure, normal digestion gets disrupted. Constipation, cramping, irregularity, these aren't just uncomfortable in a survival scenario, they're debilitating. The fiber in oats keeps the digestive system moving consistently, which matters more than most people realize when stress is already working against you. And then there's something quieter, but just as important. A warm bowl of oats in the morning, even in the middle of chaos, signals routine. It signals normalcy. The brain responds to that. A sense of structure, even a small one, provides psychological grounding when everything else feels unstable. Buy in bulk. Divide into sealed, moisture-proof containers as soon as you get home. Keep them away from humidity and insects. And remember that plain rolled oats have a significantly longer shelf life than anything pre-flavored or pre-packaged. Simplicity, again, is the advantage. Now we move to the food that most average survival stockpiles are missing entirely, and that absence has consequences that aren't obvious until they've already set in. Canned fish. Sardines, salmon, mackerel, these are not glamorous. They don't get featured in survival content nearly as often as they should, but from a nutritional standpoint, they are doing something that no other food on this list can do alone. Omega-3 fatty acids. Your brain is roughly 60% fat, and a significant portion of that fat is omega-3.
These fatty acids are not optional extras, they are structural components of brain function. They regulate mood, support memory, reduce inflammation in the nervous system, and directly influence how well you handle psychological stress. When omega-3 levels drop, and they drop fast without dietary sources, cognitive function starts to slip. Not dramatically, not at all once, but gradually. Alertness fades, stress feels harder to manage, emotional regulation becomes more difficult, decision-making slows down. In normal life, that's inconvenient. In a survival scenario, that degradation can be genuinely dangerous. The person who runs out of mental composure first is the person who makes the bad calls, uses resources too fast, panics at the wrong moment, misses the solution that was right in front of them. Canned fish stops that from happening. It provides complete protein, essential fats, and immediate nutrition with zero preparation required. No cooking, no water, no refrigeration. Open the can and eat. Fish packed in water or plain oil stores best and lasts longest. Avoid varieties with heavy sauces, which shorten shelf life and complicate storage. Check cans before you buy. Dents are often fine, but rust, swelling, or damage around the seal are disqualifying. Rotate your stock consistently and find ways to incorporate it with the other staples, mixed into rice, combined with oats, eaten alongside beans, because as a standalone protein and fat source, it makes everything else on this list more complete. Which brings us to the food that most average survival stockpiles are missing entirely, and that absence has consequences that aren't obvious until they've already set in. Beans. Here's the mistake a lot of people make. They focus on calories, they focus on carbohydrates, and they treat protein as secondary. That is a costly error in any survival situation, and here's why. When your body runs low on dietary protein, it doesn't just stop growing muscle, it starts consuming it. The body will break down its own muscle tissue to keep vital organs functioning. That process, called catabolism, doesn't just weaken you physically, it drains your immune function, depletes your stamina, and contributes to the kind of persistent fatigue that makes everything harder. You're not just getting tired, you're getting structurally weak.
Beans interrupt that process. They're packed with plant protein, shelf-stable for years, and inexpensive enough to stockpile in meaningful quantities. When combined with rice, which we'll get to in a moment, they create what nutritionists call a complete protein. The amino acid profiles of beans and rice complement each other almost perfectly, meaning together they provide the full spectrum of what your body needs to maintain muscle and support recovery. Among beans, lentils deserve special mention. They cook faster than most other legumes, they require less soaking, they yield high nutrition per serving, and are easy to prepare with minimal resources. If you're deciding where to start with beans, lentils are the highest value entry point. The one thing you must account for with beans: water. Soaking and cooking beans requires significantly more water than most other foods on this list. Plan for that. Don't build a stockpile of beans without thinking through your water situation alongside it. Store them dry, in airtight containers, away from sunlight and moisture. And like everything else here, rotate. Eat the oldest, replace with fresh. Beyond the physical, there's a psychological dimension to beans that matters in the long term. Feeling full, genuinely, sustainably full, has a calming effect on the mind. When your stomach is satisfied, it's easier to think clearly, to be patient, to avoid the kind of rash decisions that come from a place of desperation and hunger. Protein and fiber together, which beans provide in abundance, is the combination that keeps hunger away for the longest stretch. And now, the foundation underneath all of it: rice. If the other four foods are the pillars, rice is the ground they stand on. It is the most reliable, most flexible, most universally valuable survival food that exists. Properly stored in airtight containers with oxygen absorbers, white rice can last up to 30 years. 30 years! No other food on this list comes close to that kind of longevity. What rice does, more than anything, is provide the caloric baseline. Without enough calories, nothing else works. Protein can't rebuild tissue if the body is in starvation mode. Fat can't fuel the brain if basic energy needs aren't being met. Vitamins and minerals are processed more efficiently when caloric intake is adequate.
Rice handles the caloric foundation so that everything else can do its job. And it does that while pairing seamlessly with every other food in the system. Rice and beans for complete protein, rice and canned fish for a hot, nutritionally complete meal with omega-3s and sustained energy. Rice with peanut butter stirred in for a high-calorie, satisfying preparation that requires almost no effort. Rice is the platform that everything else builds on. Store it in sealed, airtight containers, not the original paper or thin plastic packaging. Use oxygen absorbers to prevent oxidation. Keep it in a cool, dark, dry location and rotate. Always rotate. But there's one more thing about rice that rarely gets mentioned, and probably should. In a prolonged crisis, one that goes on for weeks or months, rice becomes currency. It's basic enough that everyone needs it. It's dense enough to trade in meaningful quantities. People will trade medicine, tools, water, services for rice. That barter value is not a small thing. It's an extension of the food's utility beyond nutrition. And there's something else, something quieter. A hot bowl of rice in the middle of a difficult, uncertain situation does something to the human mind that's hard to quantify, but impossible to ignore. It signals that things are still okay enough for a meal. It restores, even briefly, a sense of normalcy. That sense of control, of "we still have this," is its own form of survival fuel. Now that we understand what the 5 foods are and why each one earns its place, the real power comes from understanding how they work together and how to build a system around them that doesn't break down under the pressure it was built to withstand. Start with the combinations, because this is where individual ingredients become actual meals. Rice and beans together form a complete protein. That pairing alone, in sufficient quantities, can sustain a person's physical needs for an extended period. Oats and peanut butter together are an almost instant, high-calorie meal with no prep and no cooking, ideal for situations where resources are thin or you're on the move. Rice and canned fish together become a hot, nutritionally dense meal with protein, fat, omega-3s, and sustained energy all in one bowl. And beans, with almost anything else in the system, add bulk, protein, and staying power to what would otherwise be a lighter meal. These aren't just recipes, they're resource strategies. Each combination is designed to fill a nutritional gap while keeping water, fuel, and preparation time to a minimum. When you understand the combinations, you stop thinking about 5 separate foods and start thinking about one integrated system that can generate dozens of different meals from the same small set of ingredients. Now let's talk about the one thing that makes or breaks every survival stockpile, regardless of what's in it: storage. You can have every right food in the right quantities and lose it all to 4 enemies: moisture, heat, pests, and time. These are not dramatic, cinematic threats. They're quiet and slow, and they do their damage before you ever notice them. A container that isn't fully sealed lets in humidity. Humidity invites mold and insects. Heat accelerates spoilage and degrades nutritional value. And time, without rotation, turns a well-intentioned stockpile into a pantry full of expired food you discover right when you need it most. The solutions are not complicated. Airtight containers, real ones, not loosely closed bags or original packaging, for
Oxygen absorbers inside containers for anything you're storing long-term, especially rice. A cool, dark location away from exterior walls, windows, and anything that generates heat. And a consistent rotation habit. When you buy new stock, it goes to the back. The oldest items come forward and get used first. Your stockpile should be a living, cycling system, not a static hoard. Label everything with the date you stored it. Check your supply every few months. If something looks off, smells off, or a container is damaged, deal with it immediately. A compromised can or a bag with a breach is a problem you solve now, not during a crisis when you discover it matters. And finally, the piece that holds the whole thing together in ways that calories and storage charts never fully capture: mindset. This is the part of survival preparation that almost nobody talks about seriously, and it might be the most important part of all. Physical sustenance is only half of what keeps a person going through a prolonged crisis. The other half is psychological stability. And that stability doesn't come automatically. It has to be built into your system the same way nutrition does. Regular meals do this, even simple ones, even repetitive ones. The act of sitting down at a consistent time, preparing something, eating it, that rhythm communicates something to the brain at a very deep level. It says, we are still in control. We still have structure. Things are hard, but they haven't fallen apart completely. That message, repeated daily, is not a small thing. It is the difference between maintaining composure and gradually unraveling. The foods in this system support that stability in two ways. Nutritionally, through omega-3s that regulate mood, through protein that maintains hormonal function, through steady energy that prevents the kind of blood sugar crashes that amplify anxiety and irritability, and psychologically, through foods that have enough flavor and satisfaction to make eating feel worthwhile rather than mechanical, which, over weeks, is what keeps appetite alive and caloric intake consistent. So here is the question to sit with when this video is over. Is your pantry built for comfort, or is it actually built to last? Because those are two different things. And most people, if they look honestly at their shelves right now, have built for comfort, for familiarity, for the feeling of being prepared rather than the reality of it. The 5 foods in this system, peanut butter, oats, canned fish, beans, and rice, aren't exciting. They're not glamorous. They're not what anyone pictures when they imagine a well-stocked kitchen. But they are what survival science, crisis data, and hard-earned human experience consistently point to as the real foundation. The things that keep people alive, sharp, and together when everything outside their door stops being reliable. You don't need a massive budget to build this. You don't need a specialized setup. You need intention, consistency, and the willingness to prepare for reality rather than comfort. Start this week. Buy in quantities you can rotate, store properly, and build the system before you ever need it, because by the time you need it, building is no longer an option. That's what Essential Pantry is here for. If this video gave you something real, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Leave a like if it was worth your time. And if someone in your life needs to hear this, share it with them. Stay prepared, stay wise, and remember, in survival, it's never about more. It's always about the right choices.